Bulvinaka, and I hope you guys enjoyed the screening of Soli Bula. And now that you've got the film still fresh in your brain, we are now going to have a sit down with the cultural consultant for Soli Bula, Mr. Simione Sevudredre. Bulvinaka. He was involved right at the beginning of the film. I would go to him every now and then to ask certain things about the script, certain cultural backgrounds. Why does this work this way, or why did we do things that way? And Mr. Sevudredre proved to be a valuable source of information that culminated in what you just watched now on screen. Before we begin, I'd just like to point out that we are in the Fiji Museum. As you can see, the lovely brewer in the background there. I thought it's pretty, relevant to our little discussion today. And so before we start, I'd like to say, I give a little shout out in Vinaka Vakalevu to the Fiji Museum for having us here at this location, this great location, and it really sets the mood, I gotta say. Mr. Sevudredre, before we get into the meat and potatoes of this discussion, I just want to ask if you could just introduce yourself for those of you who don't know you, and your role in the film.
Nakabalibu, nadango Simione Sevudredre, au dabutu meno korolawa kinabusandere naboli kuitailebu. My name is Simione Sevudredre. I am from the clan of Ndere, which is located in the northern part of the Tailevu province and in the village of Lawaki. There are 4 villages with the same clan name, but I'm one of those. And yeah, that's on me. And my involvement or my role is to provide cultural context for the project for Soli Bula. A lot has been written, a lot has been articulated, a lot has been documented about the Nrua. My role was to just bring it into a sizable level for easy understanding and for the technical team at Soli Bula to work with. It's not the total explanation or knowledge, it is just a summary of the traditional knowledge regarding culture in general, regarding norms and practices in the past. For the actual Nrua, you have to go to the actual people, the Lemaki, and the Chafau people, and the people of Nukutumbu in Rewa, who are the original crafts or canoe rights. You have playwrights, you have canoe rights. That's from me.
Naka, so back when I was showing up at your office with a little printout, and I was like, hey, what do you think of this? I'm curious, what is your first thoughts when you read the script? Because as you've just seen, it's not really as straightforward as it may all seem. It's definitely a twist on how the story was told. And so I was just curious, what is your first thoughts? What went through your mind when you're reading the script for the first time or the first few times?
Be honest, I read the script from a cultural perspective, where accuracy, authenticity is the way to go about it as far as explaining and unpacking all things on indigenous culture. Perhaps it's also my background in my first degree was in more literature, and also working with fiction and drama, where I appreciate also that a lot of history is embedded in fictional works, in drama, in novels, in literature, etc. So that realization sort of came to I drew from both. Here is when I saw the script, in my head, this is going to be $1 million budget if we have to do all the research and all the breakdown and do all the reenactments, etc.
I mean, if you did it live action, definitely.
Yes, but because it was animation, it was a good start. But because you decided to go with a creative flick that was more palatable, sort of. instead of going too heavy, do a creative understanding based on history, drawing from it, but retelling it in a creative way. This is a creativity. I think I mentioned something about poetic license and creativity. We are not doing a documentary. We are drawing from this to do a creative expression of it.
Yeah, fictional retelling.
Yes.
From a different point of view. Yeah.
So the way I saw it, here we are trying to talk about the old heavy stuff. It just flies over the head of many adults and children. The creative one is a good hook, a window for them. Once they get to see this at this level, this might encourage those who want to know more to then find out more. So that's where I position myself. The old stuff is as is. Perhaps do a small creative version to open a window and create more awareness.
When I came into this production, or at least when I was writing this story, I didn't really intend it for it to be sort of made like a doco, as in like super accurate, because for me personally, I didn't think I could actually pull it off, because I'm still sort of coming from a place of learning. And so I definitely leaned heavily on you for direction, but it was definitely a different take on a what if. With your work on the production, can you walk us through how we went back and forth in terms of your cultural consultancy with regards to directing us in terms of the story and the direction, and perhaps little bits and pieces here that you're like,
I remember we shared a lot during when you came to the office I worked at formerly, the iTaukei Institute of Language and Culture. We talked. You raised an issue, and I think I took half an hour to 1 hour just going over that issue and getting lost myself. And
down the
coming
rabbit
back.
hole.
Yes. And I remember when we had our first Zoom, you remember that we had a Zoom and you were all supposed to listen to me, but somehow I was left out. The link did not get to me. So you're all waiting for me to show up, and I didn't show up because the link did not come.
That was during the height of
COVID.
the second wave.
Yeah.
So we were all doing Zoom meetings. Yeah.
So, but
sorry about that.
we talked, and then you were able to process and synthesize what I have been talking about. I think the biggest concern of yours was, can I take something ancient and historical and flick it and do a creative twist to it? And I was guided by, and I'm still guided by it, by the words of the late Epilihau Offa. We draw from Mother Earth, but we express it in creative ways in contemporary spaces, but the grounding and the anchor is anchored in the old traditional body of knowledge. It's also how the UNESCO Convention 2003 defines traditional knowledge, or in the UNESCO term it's called intangible cultural heritage. The way it is expressed changes, but the anchor still is the tradition. A very good example is the Sulwatanga. Sulwatanga, ladies and gentlemen, we always attribute to the late Ratsulala Sukuna. He designed it borrowing from the liku vau. See, the vau, that cut, that design is very Fijian, very Pacific. But the one with the buckle was introduced by Ratskuna. But the concept of this being a normal, traditional, now cultural wear is drawn from the vau. And the way it is expressed today is using modern material, but the concept, the cut and the design is still the traditional. And that's for the Sulwatanga. That's what I mean. The concept. I mean, if you look at many Sulwatanga, it's using modern materials. How come no one in Europe has designed a costume like the Sulwatanga? Because the concept is not theirs. It is our tradition. That's what I mean when you draw anchor and tradition, but express creatively wherever it is necessary. And that's important for us to realize. We cannot turn the clock back. We can draw from it. It's an endless reservoir. We can draw from it in creative ways. Movie making, writing, poems, whatever, anything, we can. We have been not doing that, but we can.
So, well, as a side note, you know the band Red Hot Chili Peppers?
Yeah?
I saw a performance of last year. The bass singer, he actually wore what looked like a Sulu to one of the performances. So I want to know who gave him that Sulu. Sorry, I'm distracted.
We can say that's ours.
So speaking of the anchor and how we draw from the past, with this with Soli Bula, it features like two pretty big cultural practices: the human sacrifice aspect of Fijian culture and the use of the ndroa. I wanted to ask you if you can speak a bit more on the past and how, you know, what's the deal with human sacrifices, and then the second part of the question, the cultural significance of the
Ndroa. With sacrifices, the one that is featured in the Soli Bula, it shows people willingly putting themselves down as rollers for the Wangatambu, the sacred canoe, to be launched. Human sacrifice is not unknown in olden Fiji. These sacrifices, for example, when certain traditional hure are about to be built, the foundation has a human who is willingly buried in it. The belief was they will hold up the pole. If we look at it from the the traditional indigenous lens, this is sacrifice. They were also this is sacrifice for the Vanua, for the chief as the epitome manifestation of the entire Vanua. There's also but maybe for many people's awareness, we talk about sacrifice is also the bit on cannibalism, which is, for your information, was not done because there was no food. It was done as a ritual. And the ritual, whether to sacrifice a human or not, depended on which deity, which god they served, whichever tribe. If they served a god who demanded blood, then it will be done as a ritual, not because they feel like the hang of it. Then there are also incidents of sacrifice and killing and cannibalism as a consequence to warfare.
Warfare, yes. Prisoners of war.
Prisoners of war. But to go out, hey, we've run out of Roro, just catch the nearest kid you have there, let us steal him. It wasn't like that. There was a purpose, there was a spirituality and ideology they worked within, which is why to them it was not so much of a big deal whether they ate somebody or whether they buried somebody or they placed somebody as rollers to launch the canoe. But in many ways, we still have this sacrificing Soli Bula element. For example, any team that goes abroad to play rugby or netball, we can die for our country. That's the Soli Bula. That's the sacrifice. For king and country, they always say. We do that for the Vanua. We have moved away from placing people as a foundation and as rollers, but the concept,
the spirit is still there.
The spirit is still there. So we are still, this spirit is so strong in sports. When we have national sports that go abroad, or you bring in today's situation, you look at any secondary school sports, you see the Kaiwiti, that sacrifices comes to the fore. They are willing to just put anything and everything on behalf of whoever it is functioning in this level of a chief. The Vanua being the school. But see, these are contemporary applications of the anchor. Anchor is the Vanua, the chief. Contemporary spaces, it's the school, it's the name, it's the principal, etc. And all that. That sacrifice, that's in sports. That works also when we have sacrifices. I recall an instance a few years ago. The laborers went to Australia and there was a flooding somewhere in Australia, and they went out of their way to save,
rescue those people.
Rescue. Yeah. And they were highly commended. That spirit, that Soli Bula, we Soli Bula for others, because traditionally that is who we are. We call it Naviva Katurangataki. respecting and esteeming the other. You esteem the other so much, you go out of your way to ensure that they're comfortable. You go out of their way. You sacrifice the good part for them and deny yourself. That's all part and parcel from using people as rollers, as foundation, and also in contemporary space, in sports, in education, everyday living.
It's quite mind blowing when you think about it. So there's a lot of like a reason why we are the way we are. Speaking of we as iTaukei, we were explorers, and the ocean was like our backyard. Could you speak a bit about the importance of the ndrua and its significance to the culture?
I once heard this elder from Bulanga Island talking about the Ramakau. And according to him, all parts of the Ramakau symbolize Lau, Asano Lau. All parts from in the Ramakau. And also, Rua, very, very large, the largest can carry 500 people. The Turanga Tidakau, they had their own Rua makers, the Rokotinreketi. And this is why, for example, with in the Kaunrobe, they have these Tongans who are adopted, the Matapule. And in Rewa, they call the Kaisingatoka. They are Tongans.
Oh.
So this is ancient, this Rua and Canoe, this is evidence of a long relationship between Fiji and Tonga and Samoa. The Fiji version is the wood, Navesi. The Tongan and the Samoan version is the craftsmen who came in and they worked with the Vesi and they stayed and they grew. From them, they became locals. And their descendants live on today in Fiji, in Kambara, in Wulanga, and the elders live in Nukutumbu, in Rewa, and the historical site is in Narauyamba, in Kaubandra. So this is a status marker. This is like the Pajero of the olden days. If a chief has this, it shows his prestige.
Yeah.
He's well off. He has people working for him.
And he has people that believe in him.
Yeah. And sacrifice him. Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is a status symbol for a chief, and which is why there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of sacredness, which is why from Rua it is also referred to as Nawanga Tambu, sacred canoe, sacred ship. It has a lot of kinship and spirituality in it.
Yeah. As much as I'd love to keep going on and learning more about, it's really fascinating. Has a lot of notes and fascinating insights to our past and present. I guess we kind of have to sort of end it here and have like a summary. And so I wanted to ask you the final question, which is, now that people have seen this film, what is one point or what is one thing that you'd like to impart to the next generation of Fijian iTaukei kids, or with regards to Fijian culture?
Thank you very much. And not only Fijian culture, but Pacific culture, because we were one big family. Fijian culture also. You see this, you saw in the Soli Bula film, how humongous Ndrua is. It was like the king and the queen of the ocean. And in the Pacific, people are now beginning to realize that we may be small islands, but we do things in a big way. And the Ndrua is just one. Nayalo, the spirit of doing things is so big. That is our pride. That we must not lose track of that. We have big hearts and we have big ambitions. If it's directed towards Soli Bula on behalf of your country, of your school, of your team, or we all have this. It is called in English the passion, but it's a different ball game altogether for us. I also acknowledge in the Pacific, we have the moai from Rapa Nui, these humongous stone statues. We also have the site on Nan Madol, in Pompeii. These are humongous statues that were built centuries ago. You also have the Ha'amonga in Tonga. These are big. These are the modern world is just beginning to trying to understand. Yikes! Without modern tools, they were able to do that. Yes, that's who we are and who we were and are. Will we continue to be? That remains for you, the young people, because we have not tapped into this. We're just beginning to. Thanks to Soli Bula, we are beginning to just tap at the scratch at the surface. That we have this big library called Traditional Knowledge and Culture that has been, it's like a reservoir, it has not been explored. I mean, they've explored all the Greek, all the Roman, the Mesoamerican, all the Indian myths for Hollywood. They still don't know about our Pacific. Well, Disney tried it in Moana. Why can't we do more for ourselves, either in movies or in music or in stories? Talk about ourselves, take pride in ourselves, because this is the last area in the world where the Western world hardly knows enough about us. And yet we know too much about them.
That is true.
And in our knowing too much about them, we have not known too much about ourselves. So we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our ancestors, to our past, to our history, and to the future to just go back, look back in order to go forward. The Prime Minister of England, Sir Winston Churchill, during World War II, he said, the further back a person can look, the further forward a person can see. So in terms of culture, what I leave behind, you want to go forward, you need to look back. Take stock, re-anchor, and this anchor will then take you wherever you can go. And that success, you'll do you and everybody a big, wonderful, warm thanks.
That's great. It's perfect. And with that, I hope you again enjoyed this little sit down with Mr. Sevudredre. On to the next item. Naka.